The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod, and we are webcasting to you live from the Warner Center in Woodland Hills, California. Thrilled to be here with you on this Thursday. We've got a big show for you, all of which we hope you will interact with us during. As we're going to be with you live for the next 2 hours. Although I must admit, one of the interviews that we have is pre-recorded because we had people that were in town who could do it at a specific time. But you will still be able to interact, and we still will be here live, but we're going to play a recorded interview for you. More about that in just a second. I want to welcome you to the show if you've never been here with us before. Our intention here is to provide information to people who are in the autism community. To us, this means individuals who are parents, teachers, practitioners, and of course, individuals who are on the autism spectrum themselves. We hope that we can shed light on subjects that maybe aren't being covered other places. But especially today, I want you to know that it's all about the questions, right? You're going to see in just a second what that translates to. But we think it's important to be able to ask questions and that there be no question that's off the table. That's particularly really important to me. I don't always know the right question to ask, but I know that you guys help me to ask the right question. And I think it's important, even if we don't have answers and answers aren't available, to keep asking the questions. That's certainly important to me. Want to show you the way that you can ask a question and the way that you can talk to us. Kelby's going to cycle through some of the different ways that you can participate in the show, watching it or asking questions. While he does that, I'll remind you that our homepage is autism-live.com. When you go there, you can watch the live show, or you can watch a recently recorded live show, or you can watch the 100 most recently recorded shows. You can also ask questions. There is a live feature to the side of the computer screen. If you'll put your cursor in the box that says your question, all you have to do is type, hit enter, and it shows up here on the screen. You and I can have a conversation, and more importantly, you can have a conversation with our guests, whether they are live or recorded. We maintain contact with them. So even if it's not live, send in your question and we'll be happy to track them down and get an answer for you. I want to remind you at the start of the show that we have many experts that are here on the show, but I am not one of them. My credentials to sit here with you: I am an autism parent and a former teacher. My son was diagnosed with autism at the age of 2.5, and he is now about to be 13. How did that happen? A teenager. I don't know what I'm going to do now. But in any case, he is the light of my life. And we are grateful for all the progress that we've been able to make, and we have made tremendous progress. And I say we because it's progress not just where my son is concerned, although certainly we could spend hours talking about that, or at least I could. But progress that our family has made, progress that I personally have made in understanding what's happening with my son and appropriate ways of helping him to achieve the things that are important to him. And not to worry about things that are not as important, right? It's a balancing act, and figuring out everything about how do we negotiate this entire new world that we found ourselves in, the autism world. So I'm not an expert, as I started out saying, but we do have experts here with us, and I personally feel my mission here is to help you find the resources that are important to you. If I can save you 5 minutes or $5, I feel like I've done my job here today, just for the day. All right, we like to start the show with something we fondly refer to as the jargon of the day. This is when we take on one word, one phrase, one acronym. We try to figure out what are the experts talking about when they mention these terms and these phrases. Now, last week, we talked about what sensory integration was. And so today, we're going to put a finer point on that and talk about sensory integration therapy or treatment. This is something you're going to be hearing more and more about if you haven't started hearing about it already. So let's take a look at what our actual definition is. Sensory integration therapy, it's treatment and therapy that provides stimulation of vestibular, proprioceptive, and tactile senses. Love jargon, right? Because they just give you more jargon. So we're going to talk about these three things: vestibular, proprioceptive, and tactile senses, because a lot of people get confused and go, oh, well, sensory integration therapy, isn't that all rolled into my OT? Sometimes you will come across OTs that are working on things in these three categories, but I think sensory integration therapy, we're looking at this and it's a much more specific thing where they're only working on those things. Let's take a look at our working definition. Sensory integration therapy, it's therapy and treatment that seeks to improve the brain's ability to process and organize sensations. So we're not gonna, with an OT, you're gonna see kids who are doing, the push pin to try to build their pincer grasp, and they're gonna work on gross motor things. There might be things that are crossover, but we're working on it on a very specific way. So let's go back to what's a vestibular sense in our actual definition. Vestibular is that you're thinking about the inner ear and our ability to balance and make sense. And when you think about the level that is in our heads that is constantly working and correcting for us to be able to walk in a straight line, for us to be able to sit, stand, run, and maintain balance. If you've ever had any kind of vestibular dysfunction at all, you really begin to understand how much is at play in that inner ear and keeping us moving. I have had, I'm somebody who suffers from vertigo and have had some inner ear issues with a slight problem with Meniere's disease, where your inner ear, you form crystals. Oh my gosh, how I hope that never happens to me again, because you can't even walk in a straight line. You look like you're a little bit drunk. The room spins. Oh my goodness. By the way, if you're having issues with that, there's a series of exercises that they've discovered. You don't have to be treated medically. There's a whole series of things that you can do, either have somebody else do where you lean back and they tilt your head a certain way. You can find them online. You can do it yourself. What a difference it can make for a lot of people who suffer from that kind of issue. But for our kids on the autism spectrum, if they are having an inner ear imbalance, we will see sometimes our kids have a lower ability to handle things vestibular, or sometimes they crave that. So our kids that we see spin constantly, and then sometimes speak better after they spin, they crave that particular kind of sensation. We don't exactly know why yet, but it's great to know where your kid is on that line of are they oversensitive or undersensitive in terms of vestibular sense. I am completely oversensitive. You put me on a stationary bicycle and I'm car sick for a week. I'm not kidding. But my child, he did the astronaut training, which is all about vestibular senses, where they put them on essentially a turntable and they spin them a certain number of times in one direction in one position, and then they spin them the other way in a certain number of times and there's a series of exercises that they do changing their positions. It takes like 10 minutes to do it, but for kids who are underactive in terms of vestibular, a lot of times it awakens the sense that allows them to speak. I don't know why, but I have watched as they have put kids that I have seen not be able to say a sound, do the astronaut training, and that's literally what they call it, astronaut training, do the whole thing, and the child sits up and says a sentence. It's amazing. We used to take my son to Disneyland and send him on the teacups, and he could speak better after being on the teacups because he's one of those kids. He has to go with dad because mom can't do it. He'd be speaking and I would be over in a gutter throwing up. Okay, so that's vestibular. Then we talk about proprioceptive. This is a whole area that's absolutely fascinating in the world of autism. Proprioceptive is your ability to know where your body is in space and time and keep track of it with your brain without having visual sense on it. So if you can walk upstairs without looking at your feet, you're using your proprioceptive sense. A lot of our kids on the autism spectrum have issues proprioceptively. They require stimulation to know where their arm is in space. We use the term disintegrate, and we see kids have meltdowns, and we have used the expression, oh, they just disintegrated in front of me. But the truth of it is that's actually what we're talking about. They disintegrate. When our proprioceptive is working well, we are completely integrated. We know where we are in space. We may not be totally conscious of it all the time, but I know where my feet is. I know where my hands are in space. You know that moment when you're sitting someplace and you doze off and you jolt awake and you kind of have to grasp something because you don't know where you are in space and how disconcerting that moment is? That's what it's like for some of our kids on the autism spectrum on a regular basis. So for some kids, brushing them with a dry brush helps them to be aware of, okay, that's where my arm is, and helps their brain to be stimulated to know. So when I'm looking at somebody and taking notes, that I know my hand is here. For other kids, it can be pressure, squeezing, burrito, that kind of thing that can help them to awaken that sense, and everything in between, right? Really, really interesting place of study. And if you've got a child who doesn't seem to be aware of and is bumping into things, this is something really to be looked at. And then, of course, tactile, which I think is the sense that we're all aware of. What does it feel like? We've got kids who are hypersensitive in terms of tactile, that a scratchy tag or scratchy clothes are going to drive them crazy, right? But then there are kids on the opposite end of that spectrum who can't feel things for whatever reason, where they're a little bit numb to things, and they're more likely to get injured because they might touch something that's hot and they don't feel it. So a really interesting area of study, and interesting to see how when we work on things sensory-wise, what that can do for our kids. Now, there is an additional component to this too that isn't listed here that a lot of people are looking into, which is sensory in terms of smell. So we're going to be talking about that in just a moment. But sensory integration therapy, it's a hot new thing, and people are finding that if you find precisely where the child needs help integrating their senses and work on that, that it can help them with that third area of the restrictive and repetitive things that qualify them for the diagnosis. It can help them to deal with what's happening around them, help to prevent them from having meltdowns, and help them to be able to contact and communicate with the world around them. Very interesting area of study. Okay, moving on. We always have a question for you. It all starts to make sense. And I mean sense in the double entendre way. What is your favorite smell? Smell is a very big part of our sensory experience for those of us who can smell. There are people who can't. But remember that smell is directly tied to taste. And we know that taste in food is a primary reinforcer. You know, that if you're eating something that smells good to you and that you enjoy, this is an area where we see motivates people. Let's say that. So smells can have an effect in terms of taste and appetite in terms of that, but they also do something very interesting, which is stimulate a part of our brain that involves memory. And what we see is that when people, some of the different studies that have been done about smell is that, for instance, if somebody is a neurotypical person is studying for a test and different smells are introduced while they're studying, that it can help them to perform better on the test. It's a very fascinating thing. So we want to know from you, what is your favorite smell? And then my secondary question for that is, what memory is that smell tied to? I love the smell of orange blossoms. It's one of the reasons why I live in Southern California. It's this time of year and a little bit earlier this time of year that you can be almost anywhere in Southern California, and if there's an evening breeze, the orange blossoms open and they're everywhere, and oh my goodness, it's my favorite thing on the face of the planet. And such a feeling of, I don't know why, I don't know what memory it's tied to, but such a feeling of well-being that comes with that I'm a New York girl and I moved to California because I wanted to be more around that. And I don't know, there's something about when you try to get it bottled, it's not something you can buy the perfume and have it be the same thing. You got to have the real deal. Eventually, I need to live near or in an organic orange orchard. I will just be the happiest, least stressed person on the face of the planet. But if that can do that for me, it begs the question, what can smells do for my child who's on the autism spectrum? Is there a way that we can use smells to increase productivity, to decrease anxiety, which ultimately increases productivity? What's your favorite smell, ladies and gentlemen? We'd like to hear from you. I'm a big Chekhov fan. And almost in all of Chekhov's plays, there's a moment where somebody stops and says, "Do you smell patchouli?" I've always wanted to know if that was because Chekhov had some sort of a sense memory from smelling patchouli, and now because of having done so many Chekhov plays in my life, if I smell patchouli, that's a very specific memory as well. What do you remember when you think of a smell, and what does it evoke in you, and how does it make you feel, and then what are you capable of doing? These are our questions today. Okay, moving on. We always have a topic of the week, and our topic this week is, and we've done this before, but I think it's important, and I wanted to talk more about it, working with what you have. So often we find ourselves, well, if I only had this, if I only did this, and I subscribe to the ruby slipper theory of the world, which is, we have these hopes and dreams, and if I just could do that, and it would be so easy, da 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 da. But there's that moment at the end of The Wizard of Oz when Dorothy has the realization that she went looking for all these things from other people, but the only thing she ever really truly needed, she already had. And in the case of the fairy tale, it's the ruby slippers, and she had it the whole time. She had to go on the journey to discover that, and I think it's much bigger metaphor for everything in the world. But so many ways and time this has been replicated that people say, well, I need this in order to do this. But the truth is, it plays out that often everything that we need right now, we actually have. Sometimes you need a little luck to go with it. But what can we do with what we have, I think, is the real substantive question. What do you have, and what do you need to accomplish, and how can you use what you have? Because we can waste a whole lot of time wishing and wanting for something that we don't already have. And it's okay to dream, but getting down to brass tacks and getting to the progress is the important thing. So working with what you have. I've had so many conversations this week with people who have said, well, I wish I was like so-and-so, or I wish I had what so-and-so had. We're all going to feel that way at some point or another. But the reality is that my grandmother always used to say, if you could go into a room with a bunch of people and everybody could put all their troubles and woes into a basket and then pass them around, the thing that would happen is that everybody would take their own back rather than deal with somebody else's. So if we make peace with it and go, okay, this is what I'm working with, what can I do with that? Instead of arguing what is. It's that Byron Katie thing, loving what is, but also working with it. Let's love it and work with what we have. We'll talk a little bit more about that. All right, we've got a big show for you. You ready for this? Okay, in just a minute, we're going to be joined by a gentleman who refers to himself as the autistic poet. I'm talking about Russell Lehman. He is an author, a speaker, an advocate, and he's going to be joining us for the first time here on the show via Skype. We're really excited to have him with us. It is Mindful Thursday. We're going to try to find some time to talk mindfully about the questions that we ask, because asking the right question is 9/10 of everything, right? And then I think we're going to start this, actually, we were saying we were going to start at 11 o'clock, but I think we're going to start it at 10 minutes to 11. Polly Tomey and Del Bigtree joined us a week ago tomorrow. They are the producers, two of the producers from the very controversial film that's making headlines everywhere, Vaxxed. And Nancy Alspaugh-Jackson and I sat down with them for a very special edition of Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. It was a gloves-off interview. There was nothing off the table. We could ask anything that we wanted. And the only thing that we said to them, they didn't ask us for us, but we thought that it was important in terms of the integrity of the interview to present it in its entirety with no editing. So we didn't take even a millisecond out of it. You'll see that we did go to commercial breaks, but we didn't take anything out of the interview. That was the promise that we made to them. I think you're going to find it's a very interesting interview. I said with Nancy yesterday that my hope with that interview is that afterwards you will feel like it's appropriate for you to ask questions. And I think my hope is that after the interview, you will have more questions than maybe you had as it started. I think that that's a great place for the conversation to start. It does not seek to answer your questions, but to help you to understand what's happening and to ask your own questions. So that interview is going to be starting soon. But first, we're going to take a break, and then when we come back, Russell Lehman, the autistic poet, is going to be with us. Stick with us.
You say howdy, we say hi. Let's get rowdy, let's get wild. Let's get wild. Let's get wild. Let's get wild. Let's get wild.
Hey, welcome back to Autism Live. We heard you. Everybody wants
macaroni and cheese.
Yeah, but we're gonna make it allergy free. But here's what's the crazy part of this macaroni and cheese. It's actually healthy.
And it tastes good.
Yeah, it tastes really good.
That's the most important part.
So we're gonna start, we got our water boiling. There's so many variations on the pasta. We're using today a corn pasta. We can verify with the manufacturer that we have a GMO-free product. So let's go ahead and put that in there.
Ooh,
And if you don't mind, stir that up for
Sure.
me, my friend.
Now it's sticking a little bit to the bottom. Is that okay?
We maybe add a little more high heat oil and spread that around again. One thing you gotta know about gluten-free pasta, if you overcook this, it becomes mush. Let's move this guy over to the other burner so you can see what I'm doing. And now we're gonna start with the old macaroni and cheese sauce. What's great is there's a lot of choices for, different soups. And the way that I look at soups, and again, please follow the recipe on your screen right now. I don't like to measure very often, but what I like to use is a creamy butternut squash soup. So this soup is great because it adds a lot of flavor to the dish, but also gives people another serving of vegetables. With kids, we don't want to over season. Maybe with the adults, we can season some for the kids first, pull it out, serve them, and then add a little more, garlic powder or onion powder or other types of things into your dish. So the next most important thing on this recipe is we're going to add in a thickener and the faux cheese. Now some people like their sauce really thick, so you just add in more cornstarch or more arrowroot, so that's not a big deal. How's that doing? You think it's ready?
I think it's done.
Okay, so why don't we switch? I'll take that, you do that.
Okay.
And I'm going to strain this bad boy here. Here, let me turn that off.
Okay.
Or we're going to cause trouble again.
Trouble in Lisa's kitchen.
Yeah, no.
That's another show.
Don't, yeah, right? So I'm going to go ahead and get this all strained. It's a good consistency. So I'm going to check to make sure our pasta is cooked. So really you just want to make sure, just like any pasta, it's a little bit squeezy, a little bit. Nice. Dude, good job. We're good.
Looks yummy.
So even though the cheese is not totally melted, it's okay, don't panic. What's important is that you're gonna love this recipe once you eat it. What I enjoy most about this recipe is that it smells good, but this stuff is amazing. So if you don't mind, I'm going to serve you some up, and you can maybe blow a little bit on it so you don't burn your mouth. Sorry, I'm once a mom,
I
always
was
a
like,
mom.
just like we tell our kids.
I know, right?
God, I can't wait. I'm excited.
So I'm gonna give a shot of this too, but
Oh my gosh, that is so good.
this is the ultimate comfort food. So
Oh, it's so
isn't
good.
it good?
And I'm not just saying that. It is really good. It literally tastes like something our kids would really like. And that sweetness is really, really, really good.
So the bonus for us is that when we're serving this to our kids, they're actually getting a full serving of vegetables in this. So instead of just eating a bunch of carbs and worthless calories, you're actually getting some good stuff in this. And we'll be back next time. I hope you join us again here on Autism Live. We're really loving the feedback, and if you have additional feedback, here's how you get it to us. You can send it to us via email at autismlive@gmail.com. On Facebook, facebook.com/autismlive. And also there's thousands of recipes waiting for you to discover them with pictures and different things on the Taka website. So you can hit Taka on the web, takanow.org, and we'll be back. Hopefully we'll get to do this again.
I had so much
Maybe
fun.
we'll have a little wine, but you got to join us next time. We'll look forward to seeing you then.
Bye, guys. We're going to keep eating.
You say howdy, we say hi. Let's get rowdy, let's get wild. Let's get wild.
Welcome back to Autism Live. You can see on your screen that we are joined by a very special guest right now, Russell Lehman. Russell, am I saying your last name correctly?
Yeah, you did.
Okay.
Very good.
We had a whole debate about it. Was it Lehman? Was it Lehman? But I thought that I'd heard you say Lehman. So Russell Lehman, he is, you said 25 years old, Russell?
Correct.
And he is sometimes known as the autistic poet, a writer, a speaker, an advocate on the autism spectrum himself. Russell, we welcome you to the show. We're thrilled to have you here with us.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
And it was something, you know, you and I we went through a lot of different machinations in order to figure out how best to do this. And we decided that we'd start with Skype, but at some point we hope to have you here in the studio with us.
Yeah, definitely.
And thrilled to have you with us. I think a lot of people who are watching the show would like to start with just talking about how old were you when you were diagnosed with autism?
I was diagnosed with autism at University of Washington's Autism Center when I was 12. It was a very long road to get there. I had the telltale signs of autism since I was born, and those first 12 years of my life were filled with just struggles and agony and despair, and we couldn't find any answers, and we had to jump through a lot of hoops, and finally having the official diagnosis of autism gave my family and I a lot of clarity into how to handle my symptoms and why they were happening in the first place.
And I'm curious, so at 12 years old, when you went and you got the diagnosis, did your parents talk to you about it? Were you there when the doctor was saying this, what it is, or did you find out later?
I was there. I was very much involved in the whole process. My family never really hid anything from me. They knew I was wondering why all this chaos was happening in my life, and so they involved me, I involved them. It was very much of a team effort between my parents and I.
And you've talked about chaos and struggles. Can you tell us a little specifically about what kinds of things were going on that led your parents to take you for the diagnosis?
Starting, well, when I was in preschool, my first signs of social anxiety and just, not wanting to interact with other kids showed up. I would go to preschool and stay inside my cubby all day, and, just sit in there for 7 hours and not interact with any kids.
Do you
And
remember what you were feeling in those days when you were in the cubbyhole, Russell?
not in preschool, that I vaguely remember it, but my mom really remembers it, and I know the teachers were very worried about me because I was the only kid isolating myself. But that progressed as I became older, and I in kindergarten it was very hard for me. First, second grade were very hard, and then in third grade, I had to drop out of third grade because I just I had many symptoms arising at that time in my life: obsessive compulsive disorder, depression, numerous extreme phobias. So I was pretty much, a shell of my former self, and I wasn't able to function in the outside world. So I did drop out of third grade. I was then able to go back to fourth grade, had to drop out of fourth grade later in the year. Then the same thing repeated itself in fifth grade. Um,
Those are tough years. I gotta say,
yeah,
we talk a lot about junior high years and high school years, but I have been able to see recently that the whole concept of kids being mean to other kids really seems to come into play in third grade. Was it a lot of bullying, Russell, that was preventing you from being able to be there? Was it a combination of bullying and sensory? What was going on?
uh, bullying in the sense of from my teachers. The kids were great.
Okay.
I had the kids were amazing. Um, the teachers didn't understand who I was. And at that time, my family didn't really know what was going on. So, we didn't know I had autism or anything. But, um, the teachers, this was up in Seattle, Washington, where we used to live. And they were just very, old school, no accommodations, no exceptions, no anything. Um,
So they
so I was,
wanted you to
uh,
sit down, pay
yeah,
attention, keep your mouth closed,
yeah,
hands on the table, and
definitely,
and
yeah,
so you were a square peg round hole.
yeah,
Not
definitely,
everybody can do that.
yeah,
I'm sorry. I mean, that's like, I think we all just had that sharp intake of, oh my gosh, it was the teachers, not the students. But when you
yeah.
say that you dropped out, does that mean that you stayed at home and were homeschooled?
The school was, schoolwork was sent home, and I would do it with my mom, and then she'd drive it back to the school. Um, However, after fifth grade, I did drop out because my OCD had taken over my life. I was a slave to my OCD. I was washing my hands until they would bleed. I was, doing all these things that occupied my whole day. It was a 24/7 job. So I was admitted to a psychiatric ward at Children's Hospital up in Seattle to try to get it under control. And I stayed there for 5 weeks, and they couldn't even figure out what was happening with me. So they discharged me with basically a pat on the back and a good luck.
Mm.
Um, so we went through all these things, and you know those years in those 5 weeks in the hospital were very traumatic for me because they did exposure therapies to me, which were pretty unprofessional. I had a huge phobia of bugs, and they would put me in this room and lock the door behind me, and they wouldn't allow me to leave until I touched and sniffed a certain amount of dead bees and flies, which I was terrified of.
Right.
And I was 11 at that point, so
And we want to
um,
make it clear for the viewers at home that that is a technique that's called flooding. It is not something that is generally recommended to do
yeah,
with kids at all, but particularly
yeah,
kids who are having severe issues. There is
yeah,
a much easier, gentler path to do, but it takes a lot more time.
hmm,
I'm shocked and appalled, and I want to apologize to you that they were doing flooding with you. That seems
yeah.
like not a good choice. Uh,
It wasn't at the time, it really was detrimental to me. But in the short run, it was. But in the long run, I don't regret anything that's happened to me, and that's why I became a motivational speaker, is because all the pain and suffering I've been through is just made me who I am today. And I'm very proud of myself. I'm lucky to say I'm one of the few people who actually I know my true self, and I accept my true self, and I want others to embrace their challenges and run towards them instead of away from them.
And I so appreciate you saying that. And I wanted to go through some of your early traumas so that people could see where you've come from, because we see what a wonderful young man you are now, and what a very capable speaker. It's inspirational to anybody who's got a child on the spectrum who's having struggles now to see where you are now. And you are very outspoken when you speak about some of the difficulties that you've had, some of the difficulties that you've had with depression. You've spoken out very eloquently about having body issues and being anorexic. Maybe you could talk for just a couple of minutes, because I think we don't hear enough about anorexia ever, because it is such a huge problem right now. But when we do tend to hear about it, we hear about it about girls. And there's been more and more evidence that girls on the spectrum are in particular at risk for anorexia. But we have not heard a lot about our young men with anorexia. So I wondered if you could talk just a little bit about that, Russell.
Yeah, when I was, 21, I entered into a horrible, horrible depression that lasted for a couple months. From the age of about 15 onward, I always found that going to the gym was a great way for me to alleviate my symptoms and keep them in check. But during this depression, I wasn't able to leave my house, let alone my bedroom, and therefore I wasn't able to work out or go to the gym. So I was very concerned, about my body, because my OCD, it morphs. Whatever entrance it sees, it will take that. And so my I started obsessing about my body out of nowhere. And it evolved very rapidly, where I, was eating about like 400 calories a day when I, was used to eating about 2,800 calories a day. I started losing my hair. I was crashing to the floor. Every time I got up to walk, I would fall down to the floor due to lack of energy. During that whole depression, I did not take one shower, or I did not even change any of my clothes for 56 straight days. And, here I was crying about 5 hours a day, literally, just having meltdowns and crying. My shirt would be soaked with my tears, and I didn't have the energy or the motivation to change or even shower for 56 straight days.
What turned that around, Russell? What stopped that and got you to where you are today?
Well, I've learned, every single year I'm confronted with a huge challenge, and so I know it's going to happen. It already happened this year. I know it'll happen next year. That's part of who I am. That's part of what makes me me. So I've learned that whenever I'm confronted with a challenge, especially that depressive episode when I was 21, where I wanted to end it all, I really did. I didn't, because my family never gave up on me, so I didn't want to give up on them. It's all about baby steps. That one day, deciding, choosing to have the strength to take one step outside of the front door. That was a success, and I called it a day. The next day, I took 2 steps out the door. And people might be impatient and say, no, you have to, make more progress. But as Confucius said, it doesn't matter how slowly you go, as long as you do not stop. And once those baby steps add up, it turns into one giant leap forward. And that's how I got out of it. That's how I get out of all my challenges. And I continue to really push that message in my speeches I give.
Well, and let's talk a little bit about that, because people need to know that if they want to have you at their event, that you're able to come and speak. This is something that you're doing more and more of. Where should people go if they're interested in finding more information about you, Russell, and how to book you as a speaker?
My website is the best way to book me as a speaker. It's www.theautisticpoet.com. And you know, there's a bunch of information about me on there. There's clips of some of my speeches. There's interviews, newspaper articles, and all my message about what I bring to the table as a speaker. So once again, my website, www.theautisticpoet.com. That's the best way to reach me. There's an email you can send on that site.
Great. And you
So,
also
yeah.
have a book. We talked about the fact that you're an author. You have a
Yeah.
book that is, and Kelby, can we put up the picture of the book there? Inside Out, Stories and Poems from an Autistic Mind. And you see right on the cover that it says, beautiful poems by Temple Grandin. That was her quote about it. And you know, you had this title long before there was a Disney movie. We should say that this is not you riffing on Disney. Disney riffed on you.
Yeah.
So I don't know how that works out. Have there been any difficulty? Because I'm sure they've wanted to put books out called Inside Out. Have they had to call you about any of that?
I don't think there's I believe books can have the same titles. I haven't been contacted by them at all, but
All right. Well,
yeah,
you got there first. We just want to let
I know.
people know you got there first. And a book of poems. Where can people get the book?
Again, my website, theautisticpoet.com. You can order the book there. You know, my website is basically the go-to thing for everything concerning me, my speaking, my books, anything.
Okay. Russell, we've really enjoyed this time. We want to tell people, go to your website, see what you've got there. You've got a wealth of information there. Read some of Russell's poems. You're doing amazing work. You're a very inspirational young man. And if you are looking to book someone to speak at an event that you want to know can bring hope to your event, Russell is somebody that you should definitely talk to about having him come to that event. We thank you, Russell, for being patient with us as we figured out a way to connect with you. But this Skype worked great, and you didn't have to get on a plane.
Glad to hear it.
But we look forward to talking to you again. Thank you for being with us. And keep up the good
I really
work.
appreciate it, Shannon. Thank you very much.
You take care.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
So that was Russell Lehman, author of Inside Out, a really wonderful speaker. We're going to take a break. We're going to come back for our mindful moment for the week. And then in just a few minutes, it's time for us to show that special edition of Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. Nancy and I sat down with the producers of the very controversial film Vaxxed, Del Bigtree and Polly Tomy. We asked them many questions, and we're going to air that interview live. It's over an hour, so that's going to be happening in just a few minutes. But stick with us. We'll be back with our Mindful Thursday moment after these messages.
Hi everyone, welcome back. It's April, which means it's also spring. And what we're going to be doing today is making our very own chia pets. What's cool about this project, it's an activity that you can revisit with your family as you watch it grow and change. All right, now that I piqued your interest, let's get to it. The materials we'll be needing are water, dirt, arts and craft materials, chia seeds, a container, and nylon. So let's get started. It's super easy. All you're gonna do is you're gonna take an old pair of nylons that you have, you're gonna cut off the toe, and what you're gonna do is you're gonna take some of your chia seeds and sprinkle them at the very bottom. We don't need too much, just a little bit. And then once I've got my chia seeds there, I'm gonna take my dirt and pour that in. And we wanna make sure that we've got quite a bit in there. You want to keep this tail. What this does is acts as a way to soak up the water to feed your little chia plant. So I'm going to take the bottom now. I'm going to tie this into a knot. So now that I've got this little guy, now it's time to decorate him. And you can decorate him however you feel like. What I did is that I made some little features out of felt that I'm going to add to my little guy to give him a face. Now that I've got them all decorated, I'm gonna pour some water into my container and make sure my tail is all nice and soaked up in there. And here's my little buddy. I made a mouse, but you can always make whatever kind of creature your child finds super reinforcing. Make sure they like the little animal that you make so they'll want to come back and revisit him. As you can see right now, he's a little ball, but hopefully, keeping your fingers crossed, in a week he'll have some hair. With the snap of my fingers, we're gonna go through a week in a few seconds. And oh my gosh, this little guy has changed quite a bit. Can you see how? Yeah, he's got some hair now. You can have your kids describe how this little guy looks to their friends, and you can even work on body parts by having them label all the features that this little guy has on his face. So let's see, what does he have? He's got eyes, a nose, a mouth, and ears. What do you think will happen to him if I stop watering him? Yeah, he probably won't be growing any more hair if I did that. Well, I hope you enjoyed this activity. I know I did. Tune in next time, okay? And until then, craft on. Bye, guys.
Can you see me? Can you see me flying by your side?
What is inclusion?
What is inclusion?
What is inclusion?
And what is inclusion?
I have been asked about inclusion many, many times, and what is it?
Inclusion to me is everyone getting together and playing together and learning together here at Mardi Gras for Autism.
Inclusion is acknowledging someone's differences and needs they need in the world and making an effort to help them.
I'm a parent of a beautiful autistic girl. She's 17. Inclusion is treating her like everybody else.
Is the opportunity for my son to be anything he wants to be and do anything he wants to do.
Inclusion is allowing everybody, giving everyone a chance to play together, no matter how different they are. So what do you think, Mr. Reg? Is that a good definition? I suppose it was mostly satisfactory. Thanks.
Welcome back. It is time for our quick Mindful Thursday moment. And today our suggestion to you is knowing which question to ask. I feel like that's really been our theme of the week, this whole last week with everything that's gone on, that knowing which question to ask is 9/10 of everything. And there's such a thing called a positive assumptive question, a question that it assumes there is an answer to. So our brains are supercomputers, and what the questions that we ask are what our brains work on. And you know what they say, that what you think about becomes what you say, becomes what you do, becomes what you are. So if we start with, in our minds, what are the questions that we're asking ourselves? If we're asking the right positive assumptive question, it can lead us to some really powerful changes in everything happening around us. If you ask yourself, and if you think about it from this point of view, that your brain is a supercomputer that always says yes. So if what you ask yourself is, why do I always screw up? Your brain is going to go, yes, you do always screw up, right? Instead, if you ask your whatever the question is, if you ask, what can I do today that's the healthiest choice for myself? Your brain is going to say, well, there is a healthy choice, and it will search to find that answer. If you're not eating healthy and you pare it down and you say, what healthy thing can I eat right now? Your brain will say blueberries or something else that you like, instead of saying, what can I eat right now? What can I eat that's healthy? So knowing the right question to ask in the right circumstance. And this goes for our internal, but also when we're talking to other people. It seems to me that knowing what question to ask is 9/10 of everything. And it's okay to ask people. Some of the most powerful moments in my life have been when I have said, what question have I not asked you that I should ask you? Ooh, things happen when you ask that question, especially when you're sitting with experts who are talking about your kiddo. And when you say to them, what question have I not asked? A world opens up. Okay, which feeds right into our very next segment A week ago, tomorrow, last Friday, we welcomed into the studio Del Bigtree, the producer of Vaxxed, that very controversial film that's making headlines everywhere around the country that Robert De Niro has been talking about again and again and again on the Today Show. And we welcomed Polly Tommey, who is also a producer on the film, who is featured in the film. She is an autism mom who has been with us before on the show, who has a child that she will tell you in the interview she believes is vaccine injured. And so we sat down with them, Nancy and I, no holds barred, gloves off discussion. We start with our disclaimer, but take a look. This is the interview in its entirety with absolutely no edits. I'll be back at the end to sign off, but this is a very special edition of Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. Welcome to a very special edition of Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. I'm Shannon Penrod.
And I'm Nancy Alspaugh-Jackson.
Nancy and I are thrilled this morning that we have an opportunity to sit down with two heavy hitters from the film Vaxxed. We have producer Del Bigtree, who is here with us. And we have another producer from the film, Polly Tommey, who has been with us before on the show. I don't think you've been with us live before.
Via Skype.
Yes. So we're thrilled to have them here to have a discussion. Nancy and I want to give full disclosure here at the start of the show that we both had an opportunity last night to see the film Vaxxed.
Yes, we did.
And Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh is featured in the film as an expert in the field of autism, which is what she is. We want to make sure that those of you who are tuning in for the first time are aware, again, full disclosure, that she is an executive producer on Autism-Live, which is where Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy plays.
And she is the founder and chairman of ACT Today, Autism Care and Treatment Today, for which I am the executive director.
And further, there is, in the film, there is a quick 3-second shot of my son, because he is one of the children that Dr. Granpeesheh worked with, and so there is a shot of him in the film. I was surprised, but thrilled to see my child.
I was expecting to see Wyatt, but didn't get to see him.
Because there were many different shots of Dr. Granpeesheh working with children. Right. Having said all of that, Nancy and I both feel very strongly that we are still highly qualified to have a fair and equal discussion about this very controversial film with the filmmakers.
Yes, and the film, just to give you a short synopsis, is an investigation into how the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the government agency charged with protecting the health of American citizens, concealed and destroyed data on their 2004 study that showed a link between the MMR vaccine and autism, and that this alarming deception has contributed to the skyrocketing increase of autism, potentially the most catastrophic illness of our lifetime. Del, Polly, welcome.
Thank you.
First question. Del, why? Why did you make the movie?
Well, I spent about 6 years as a producer on the daytime talks for the doctors. So I had a career celebrating the best that medicine had to offer. Great scientists, new improvements, less invasive surgeries, doctors just working miracles, really. It was such a fantastic job. Also, while doing that, though, I was always very interested in the harder stories. I was sort of on the show known to be one of the producers that would chase the big corporate stories, Monsanto, and when glyphosate, was ruled as being probably carcinogenic to humans. I actually got a debate
the
on
food manufacturer Monsanto.
the food manufacturer Monsanto, glyphosate being the herbicide that's sprayed on about 90% of the crops in this country. That's a whole other story, but just the types of stories I would chase, and I got a debate on the show between one of the heads of pharmacology over at Monsanto versus Jeffrey Smith, a GMO activist. So, I've always been fighting for health and children, and it's really important to me. So,
and you're unafraid.
Yeah, I'm not right. Yeah, I'm passionate about being a journalist.
Truth
I'm
seeker.
passionate about telling the truth. I mean, that's really what drives me, and so I really enjoy what I do. In the process of working on the show, one of my sort of inside contacts that would give me information called me and said, Del, in 2 weeks there's going to be a whistleblower from the CDC. He's going to come forward and he's going to say that they've manipulated the study on the MMR vaccine and autism, and that they actually know that that vaccine is causing autism. Now, for a medical journalist like myself, it blew my mind. I was like, if this is true, this is the biggest story, certainly of the decade, maybe of my lifetime. So in the pursuit of that, you know, it's not, it was too big a story really to just sort of throw onto a show like The Doctors. And also we were, you know, we're sponsored by pharmaceutical industry. The CDC is really good friends with ours. They'd come on the show, you know, and then there was really no way that I thought that this story would really be able to be told, certainly not right under those circumstances. But in the pursuit of finding out where is this story, how do I get to it, you know, is there any way I can get anywhere near this story, that led me to Andy Wakefield. Several contacts, sort of a long story, but I met Andy. He said he'd been working on this movie for about, you know, I think 6 or 7 months. I said, I'm interested, I want to see what you've got. I flew myself down to Austin, and I have to tell you, I sat in this basement and I watched the movie that Andy, you know, was making, and I mean, my mouth was just wide open. I was staring at just the most like data, and real statements by this whistleblower that are so incredibly alarming. You know, that 5 scientists in the most important health agency in the world were manipulating data, throwing data out, kicking kids off of a study, all to hide the fact that this vaccine was actually causally linked to autism. And I knew in that moment, I just thought, this is the biggest story of my life.
Okay, but we got to back up just a little bit, because when anybody covers this film and covers this story, and the minute that Andrew Wakefield's name comes up, there's immediate glaze over, and people say, well, we need to mention that this is one of the authors of the study that was debunked. That's the word that we hear over and over and over again, and he's completely discredited. That's another word that they use. So I think the question that everybody wants to know is, if you're an investigative journalist and the one person that you can go to is the guy that everyone, you can't say his name on television without hearing debunked, discredited, why would you believe him? And people are asking, why he directed this film. People are saying, why would we believe him?
Well, I mean, first of all, for me, I mean, in that moment, sitting there, I mean, I was just looking for the story. This is the man that said he had the story. I knew who he was. I knew the entire, I mean, I knew what everyone knew. I knew all the bumper sticker slogans. Baby killer, you know, father of the anti-vax movement, reason measles is killing children all over the world, you know, on and on, abused, handicapped children. I mean, when you hear things like that, I mean, it's so horrific.
Right.
But still, as a journalist, your first job is to find the story. Where is the story? Who's got the story? And so that's what drew me down there. You know, before I'm going to judge or, you know, deal with Andy Wakefield, I had to see, does he actually have the story that he says he has? And in the end, it doesn't. In that moment, sitting in that basement, I wasn't saying, you know, is this guy? It's written here. Here's the data, Del. He handed it to me. Here's the recordings of what this man has said. Mm-hmm. So that wasn't in question.
So that was real. So
that was real.
The source may have been questionable to some, but
sure.
you thought that
I mean,
was real.
So at the moment, yeah, you know, that's my job. This, as I'm seeing it, this data is real. I'm hearing this voice. This is the voice of William Thompson. He's saying incredibly disturbing things with lots of detail to it. Yeah. And so...
And we should say that he has since sat down with a lawyer and signed an affidavit saying that is his voice, William Thompson, that is his voice, that the information that he said is correct, and that the data he gave is correct, that he was part of a cover-up. He has signed all of that. Because at one point we were all saying, okay, you have tapes, but is it him?
Yeah.
And then he signed an affidavit and said, no, this is me.
Right.
We did get rid of documents. We did skew the data. He has said all of that, particularly about the part of the study that centers on African American boys.
And by the way, the recordings were legal because
That's a good point.
Dr. Hooker actually went over state line. It's not legal in California, Del. And he went to Oregon to make these recordings?
Yeah, California is what we call a two-party state. That
right.
means that both parties on the phone, if there's going to be recording, have to agree to that recording. Oregon's a one-party state, meaning only one of the people on the phone have to understand or know that the phone's being recorded, and that's also true in Atlanta. So both states where the phone calls were taking place were one-party states. So Brian Hook was driving 4 hours from Redding, California, up into Oregon, and making the calls from there.
Dr. Hooker, a biologist who happens to have a son with autism, we need to disclose that. And we want to get more into that, the actual study. But Polly, Polly Tomey, who is fellow autism mom.
Yes.
And Polly, you've done so much great work in the community in Europe, in England, here in the United States. You did have a working relationship with Andrew Wakefield. Can you tell us what that?
Well, yeah, I still do.
You still do.
We set up the Autism Media channel together,
Right.
really he was a scientific editor of the Autism File magazine, and
Right.
we were suddenly coming against brick walls where people were just not reading it. So we realized we need to actually visually film the absolute devastation that a vaccine-injured child affects. So that's when we started. So a lot of the B footage you see is years of going around the world, traveling to interview these people. But this is what I really want to say. Okay, so Andy was working away. He's a very, very, very clever scientific man. And before Dell came along, Brian, who's our editor, and I were just sitting there thinking, no one is going to understand the first paragraph. You need a double medical degree to just get through that. So Dell was answer to our prayers big time. Comes in, changes it around. Andy knew the story and that never changed, but made it so that people like me, the general public, could understand it. So doesn't have an autistic child, we're so grateful. And Andy doesn't have an autistic child, let's not forget that. Yes. My job is to stand up for the vaccine-damaged children that are already damaged. They need a future, they need a life. It is no joke having
Your
a vaccine.
son, Billy, is featured in the film, and your husband, and really some heartbreaking moments, Polly.
And that was never planned, was it?
No.
We never planned to put my family in the film. But Dell came to stay with us, and well...
Yeah, I mean, that was very accidental. We were looking for a story. In fact, we were flying in a family from England to sort of have a larger arcing story. We had several families in it, but we just wanted a family who could really sort of follow through a process. At that time, I was staying over at Polly's while we were editing, and Billy happened to eat a pizza at a bowling alley earlier that day with gluten in it. And people will never, if you're not involved in this autism process, that's like, oh, well, what's the big deal? I mean, it's like your kid just got heroin or PCP or some sort of outrageous drug in them. And so I was over at the house, and Billy just went off the rails, and it was scary. I mean, at first, I would literally want to just go hide in a room, and then I thought, wait a minute, hold on. And I grabbed, I think it was Polly's phone, I was like, give me your phone, and I just started recording what was happening in that household. It was devastating, it was incredible, it was scary to watch Polly handling, her son who's, I think, 220, 240 pounds, 6 something, and to see that side of it, it's something I'd never seen. It's something that the rest of us who don't have an injured child have no idea what's happening in these houses. Now, I'm not saying every child is like that. I mean, obviously there's different, issues around autism, but there are so many parents and this growing sea, this tidal wave of parents and families that are virtually jailed inside of their house because they cannot leave their child alone. They cannot go out in public with their child because they could have a moment like this and get into all sorts of trouble. But when we captured that moment, I said, Polly, I know you're a producer, and this is going to be awkward, and it's weird to put a producer in the film, but the world needs to see this part of this story, and it's an extremely effective moment in the film.
I cannot tell you how many times I've honestly wanted to walk away from this whole vaccine situation. Sponsors will pull out of our charity. People tell me, working with Andrew Wakefield, and this is it, no one's ever going to help you build the Autism Trust, whatever it may be. But each time, I have to keep going, because each time, the longer that we tell our stories, and this is what I really want other parents to know, be brave. Be brave, stand up and tell your story. #vax it in, because this is so important.
Hashtag what?
Vaxxed.
Vaxxed.
So link it to our film, and I'll tell you
yes.
why.
Or vaxthemovie.com too, we'll pull up the trailer.
These people need to know what it is that they have done to these children, what it means to take a life. They've taken their lives. That's it. Billy has had no childhood, like he should have done. No adult, teenage, no adult. He's not going to have a future. He's very unlikely to get married, have a job, have the children, be the father. All those things he could have been, gone. So, and he's one of millions worldwide, let's face it. And my point is that the parents have to, the power of the parents in numbers is they need to know, because they keep saying, oh, it's plateaued. It's plateaued. There's no more autism. We're all good now. Everything's sorted. It is not all good. Every day we're being in contact with new parents, with new diagnoses, and they're all saying the same story. My story is just nothing unique.
And do you think, Polly, that because there's been so much awareness, but it feels like a lot of the awareness, and I think sometimes we participate in this, we like to show the stories of hope and kids that are doing well and showing, and there are times when your son, has a triumphant moment, and sometimes we focus on that people have gotten desensitized and they don't realize how hard it is for a lot of our families anymore.
Right.
Do you feel like that? I'm sure you're going to get flack for showing your son in a meltdown as a parent, right?
Yeah.
People going, well, you shouldn't show that, you shouldn't do that. But do you feel like it's important for people to see that? Because I think that a lot of people have forgotten.
I have had flack already for people have called my son overweight. They've said, they're attacking him, body shaming him, whatever it may be. But he has autism, he has food issues. We are a healthy household and we're doing the best we can, but this is autism. Yes, it's.
I think there's two things. I mean, you have to understand there's two things. Coming in from not having an autistic child, I mean, I won't say that I was unaware of this issue. When on the show, many parents sent books in, you've got to tell the story of autism, the vaccine injured our child, and so I was aware of the story. And over time, when you hear this story over and over again, if you're a real journalist, and you sit with these parents and you do interviews and you sit and you hear this story and the honesty and the truth of which is told, there was always something in me saying there is something wrong with the science here. You cannot, to have science and medicine, for the last several years just kept saying, oh, it's a coincidence. That just doesn't, I'm not a scientist, but I'm a medical journalist. Coincidence, wait a minute. Coincidence is 1, 2 people sort of have the same type of thing maybe at the same time, 3, maybe 5 worldwide, 10. We're talking tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of parents describing this exact same event, sort of like saying a lightning bolt just kept hitting that one same spot for a year straight. Oh, that's a coincidence. That's not even scientifically possible.
Well, we know that there cannot be a genetic epidemic.
Right.
It takes too many generations, so there has to be something else. Let's get more into the science aspect of this.
Should we take a break first?
Yes, I think we should take a break, and we'll get back to the actual study and Dr. William Thompson and what exactly he confessed.
Okay, but we'll be right back after these messages.
I didn't.
Hello, fellow activists. In our last segment, we talked about step number 2, educate yourself. Step number 3 is get support. Now, any journey can feel overwhelming if you feel like you're walking it alone. Well, you're far from alone, because with 1 in 50 kids diagnosed with autism today, there are a lot of us out there. Of course, there's always the issue of financial support. Now, there's a handful of organizations out there that offer financial support to families in need. ACT Today, or Autism Care and Treatment Today, is one of them. Visit our website at www.act-today.org to find out more about our grant process. I want to talk about a different kind of support today, emotional support. Now, you can get that from other travelers on this path. Some of the best advice I've ever received is from the moms of other kids with autism who went to school with Wyatt or were involved with programs with him. Then there are the pioneers. These are the families that have gone through this years ago, and there was very little information out there. All of these people seem to have the desire to pay it forward. Now, one of them, Lisa Ackerman, who is one of my mentors, started an organization called TACA, Talk About Curing Autism. She actually took the concept of mentors and support groups and made it available to everybody. You can go to their website, talkaboutcuringautism.org, to find out more. During the first and most difficult year after Wyatt's diagnosis, I wrote an email to close family and friends, letting them know what was going on and the challenges our family was facing, and why we dropped out of sight. I was amazed at the outpouring of love and affection and all the help I received from that email. First, you have to be vulnerable. You can't be afraid to ask. Try this out. Could you cook me a meal? Are you going to the market? Can you pick me up a few things? Could your kids play with my kid and make them feel included? Or can you come over and clean my house? Well, maybe not that last one, except with your best friend. And maybe the best support of all is having someone that listens, and that doesn't cost a dime. So until next time, surround yourself with the loving kindness of others and keep the faith.
Welcome back to Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy, a very special edition. We are here with some of the filmmakers from Vaxxed, Del Bigtree, the producer, and Polly Tomey, a producer.
And featured prominently in the film. And
yes.
Del,
He's the
you are
boss.
as well.
He's the boss.
Okay.
It's always good to know who the boss is.
Along with Dr. Andrew Wakefield, who is the director,
The director of
and
the film.
He's the
also
big boss.
featured prominently in the film. And you wanted to circle back to Andy Wakefield, and he's been demonized by many, celebrated by many. What do you want to say?
Well, I mean, look, to leave a medical talk show to work beside Andy Wakefield, everyone around me said, "Del, that's career suicide," and I had to address that. I mean, look, there was a huge story. Certainly, I wish someone else was telling this story. I wish somebody else was at the heart of this. I wish any news channel or any newspaper in the country had decided that this was a story, and they didn't.
Can I be honest? I thought that was one of the things that occurred to me. I thought, did that occur to them when they were making this, that perhaps there was a better, less incendiary person to tell the story?
He's the one that pursued it.
Yeah.
Nobody else did. It could have been anybody else. We all, saw this story break online. Every news organization, every paper.
And in fact, did CNN put it on their website and then removed it?
They did it. iReport is something where, as a citizen, you can sort of throw something up. So someone said, "Here's a story," and then CNN took it down.
And we're talking about the CDC whistleblower.
The CDC whistleblower story. But, so I had to investigate Andy. I mean, I had to look at what am I getting into? Who is this guy really? What is this fraud all about around Andy Wakefield? And, I could write a book, or I could do another movie or two about really, I think, a hoax, if you want to call it, or a man being framed. We've done this throughout history. Throughout history, the scientists that step forward and break free of the consensus. Since science is not based on consensus, no matter what anyone thinks, science always changes when one individual discovers something new. One individual steps out of the box and says, "Wait a second, I see this a different way." Einstein, look at Galileo, who's thrown in jail because he comes to the body and says, "I'm sorry, folks, the Earth is not the center of the universe." That's basically what Andy found himself in the middle of. Vaccines, which we all believe know are extremely important, and all of our societies in the modern world are developing their health around vaccines. But what do you do when you're a doctor like Andy Wakefield, who says, "Wait a minute, these parents are all saying this one vaccine is injuring children"? Now, the thing I want to point out, is about the Lancet paper he was involved in. There's several, I think, just right up front, there's a few things that fall apart on this story right away.
How was he discredited initially and stripped of his medical license to practice in England?
Well, number one, the first thing we all hear is he's anti-vaccine, and that he was the reason everybody stopped vaccinating. Absolute lie. Complete and total lie. You look at the story, you look at the paper itself that it talked about, and all the paper says is this paper does not prove a link between the MMR vaccine and autism. More studies should be done to look at that.
It raised questions.
It raised questions.
And in fact, in the film, you show him testifying,
saying exactly
on
that.
camera.
Then what happened was they said, because that's in the paper, and that was coming from the parents. This was simply a case study where the parents were reporting what they believed. As a part of doing a study like that, you have to write everything that's said. And 8 of the 12 parents said this vaccine caused my child's autism. Now, the other thing that I think immediately falls apart is they call it the Andy Wakefield fraud. And Andy Wakefield made up fake data. Andy Wakefield did fake studies, injured children, all to make this fake paper that the Lancet published. Okay? What they always leave out is the fact that there are 12 co-authors on this paper. Top scientists in their field in the world, including John Walker Smith, who is the leading pediatric gastroenterologist in the world. These these scientists went through this study with Andy. They did a lot of the testing, not Andy. He was the one, observing and writing and taking in the data. So in the end, they had to sign their name to it. They had to read every word of this and say, yes, Andy, that's what I said. That's the test I did. That's the study I did. And they edited it and they work with him, that's how a paper's done. And then it gets submitted and published. So how? I want to ask Anderson Cooper or any other journalist that's ever stood in front of Andy and called him a fraud, explain to me how you would how a man would be able to make up fake data and slip it past the most brilliant minds in their field and get them to sign their name to it. It's not possible.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, though, that Walker Smith was also stripped of his medical, but that it has recently been restored.
Yeah, just about a year ago, it was
Yes.
recently restored in a court of law.
Yes.
The GMC is not a court of law. It was simply a medical body that pulled these two gentlemen's licenses, based, by the way, all on a journalist, basically a tabloid journalist that manipulated the history and the story around this.
In
and
the
made
Sunday
up,
Times, which is a Rupert Murdoch publication.
But help us, because I'll tell you, one of the things that I saw last week was an ABC interview that you did where you were on the phone, and then and they cut and sliced and diced, and we're not going to do that here. We're going to air everything in its entirety. But you had recorded you on the phone with the whole thing.
Yeah.
And one of the things that really jumped out to me when you were showing your part of the interview, that you said, I researched this man. I researched why this happened. And I thought, boy, I want to talk to him. Because as a mom, as my son was being diagnosed and coming in, and then, having a show in which we talk about things, and we've had Andrew Wakefield on the show talking about Alex Sportolakis. We've had, I said, I want to do some more research about this. I don't really know anything more than what I have seen. I want to know more because I don't know enough. And I went to look to find what were the counts that he lost his license on. And I looked high and low on the internet, and I saw a suggestion here, a suggestion there, but I couldn't find why he lost his medical license.
You know, Polly?
No, I will just say this one thing.
Yeah.
As a parent, and no scientist and journalist or anything else, I was one of countless British parents who, between us all, religiously went every single day to the GMC to watch, listen, hear. And Andy answered every question beautifully. The actual scene was like a scene from Hogwarts. There was a guy with a beard who was asleep every single time that I went in. It was like it was rigged. And I can say this because I'm a parent. I was there, my opinion. It was like the whole thing was rigged from the start. Journalists going around knowing, they knew before it broke that Andy was going to be stripped of all these things. It was from our point of view, there was no way that he should have lost his medical license. He answered every single question.
But why then did they say he did? What reason did they give? Do you know? Because I can't find it.
Why do they say the MMR is safe and my child got damaged? The whole thing. The whole thing.
Yeah, I don't know the exact. I think there's like 20 counts against him, and I'm not sure the ones that stuck.
There was
the
something
ones that
about using children from his child's birthday party.
Okay,
There
so
was,
and I think that's probably the one thing.
Yeah.
Of all
I've
of
definitely heard that.
these things that go on, the one thing Andy will say is that was probably a lapse in judgment. It wasn't something that he had a birthday party with his kids. He wanted samples of healthy children's blood. And so he said, my son's having a birthday party, all his kids are in my house. So he called the parents and said, would you mind if we drew some blood on your children? While they're here, I'll give them $5 or $10, And the parents signed off, and it was done by a doctor. All of that, really, even that. I mean, I've given blood in bathrooms. I've given blood in gymnasiums, in cafeterias. I mean, that's not the issue.
But the best person to answer these questions is Andy himself.
Yeah.
And if you go to the media channel, he's answered all these questions in little short bites
Yes,
by
I feel
lawyers.
like I've watched, but you know what? And we'll invite him to come in and answer because somebody needs to ask.
But I think it's more important to look at why this happened. Andy Wakefield stood in front of the country, or in the UK, and basically the world, and when asked the question, based on this study, what should we do with vaccines? What should we do with this MMR vaccine? He didn't say, stop vaccinating everybody, like that's what we all believe happened. I mean, that's how we retell the story. He told everybody, stop vaccinating.
You show in the film, he did not say that.
All he said was, parents should be allowed to continue to use the single measles, single mumps, single rubella vaccine. while we study and test this MMR vaccine because it hasn't been tested enough, and these statements being made by a growing number of parents is extremely alarming. So while we're studying this MMR, and maybe it needs to be fixed and made better, go ahead and just use the single measles, single mumps, single rubella.
And so why was that so out of the question?
It really, I think in any reasonable person, that's not out of the question. So then why is he saddled with being the father of the anti-vaccine movement and causing this fear of vaccines? Well, because 6 months after he recommended that all parents just go ahead and use the single vaccine while we take a look at this MMR, the UK Ministry of Health took away the rights of the parents to use the single vaccine. They basically banned it from coming to the country, and then Merck in the United States stopped making it. And so then all of a sudden parents were only left with this vaccine that they'd been watching the newspapers, parents saying this thing injured my child. And so they stopped using the MMR vaccine. That wasn't Andy's fault. That's the Ministry of Health in the UK and Merck's fault. They took away the parents' option to protect their child in the way they saw fit. These are free countries. The UK, the United States of America, we should have every option of every product. We are consumers. We decide what we want to do. We decide how we raise our child. We decide what we feed them. If I want to give them organic food, great. If I don't, great. That's your option. This was just about having options. Why are the options being taken away from us when we're trying to protect our children? And that's what's the heart of this story. Why was the option taken away? Because they wanted a patent. They wanted something that they could patent and own, and it was all about money.
And
the
how much money is involved in that patent? Do you know the figure on that?
I think they made, I don't know the exact numbers
Okay.
on the MMR. It's the crown jewel of vaccines. Really, I think it makes several $1 billion a year, but I don't know what the numbers are on that. But certainly, it's very lucrative to be the only company that handles measles in the United States of America, the only company that handles measles in the UK, and really ultimately worldwide. As this vaccine gets used by these countries, you're the only one that's allowed to sell it. If it gets broken up into single measles, mumps, rubella, everyone can jump in the game. Then you have competition, which is healthy. That's the way this is supposed to be. And so again, you have monopoly issues involved. You have, we have corporate interests, and this is what this story is at the heart of.
And isn't there some actual really questionable ties with Merck with some of the CDC officials?
Well, certainly if you look at, so let's talk about the film. The film
Okay,
is not
yes.
about Andy Wakefield, okay?
Right.
It's not about Andy Wakefield. It's not about Polly Tommy or Del Bigtree. This film is about a CDC whistleblower. This is a brand new story. Most of media is trying to pin this as an old story about Andy Wakefield. This is a very new story.
Tell us the story briefly.
Just in the fall of 2014, just over a year ago, one of the top scientists from the Center for Disease Control made a phone call to a gentleman named Brian Hooker, who had been investigating vaccines because he knew his child had been injured. He was a scientist, he knew how to study data, and he was trying to get the data from the CDC so he could see it himself, and he was being stonewalled. And then 10 years later, after just fighting to try and get to this data, he gets a random phone call from a man named Dr. William Thompson at the Centers for Disease Control, who says, "Brian, I know what you're looking for, and you're never going to get it unless you do what I say. Here's how we're going to get you that information." And basically found a loophole in the CDC system based on what was called sort of a citizen's request. And he said, request it this way, and I'm going to provide this data and get it out to you. And while he was on the phone, he started making statements like, every time I see a child with autism, I feel responsible. We have hidden the fact that this MMR vaccine is causing autism. Now you have to understand, Brian wasn't even on the MMR. Brian Hooker, when he was investigating this, he very much believed that mercury was the issue. And mercury is an issue, no doubt about it. So when William Thompson said, what data do you want first? Brian Hooker says, I'd like the studies on thimerosal mercury. And it's William Thompson said, okay, that's great. I need you to look at the MMR study. That's a movie. That's a moment. That is someone in the side saying, I know something you don't know. Mm-hmm. I know something bigger than what you think you're looking for. And that's the study he got out through this. He basically took a classified set of documents from the CDC, but gave Brian Hooker a legal avenue to slide it out there, unlocked it, hidden data that the CDC had thought was destroyed, and sent it to Brian Hooker so he could start analyzing it. That's what this film is about. It's about the analysis of this data that the CDC thought it had destroyed and this one scientist held on to. Dr. William Thompson is the lead scientist on this study. He was the guy crunching the numbers. And what happened was, as soon as he started running the data on these 3,000 children they were looking at in Atlanta, he immediately started seeing spikes in autism amongst different subgroups. The first one being African American children. A massive increase in the risk of autism. And you have to understand it was about timing. Is the younger your child gets this vaccine, the more likely they are to develop autism. You know, one of the things they discovered in the data right away was that African American children were, 2.63, I think is the number, times more likely, or 163% more likely to develop autism if they got the vaccine between 12 and 18 months versus if they just waited till after 3 years old. Several other subgroups, isolated autism, which means every perfectly healthy child that gets the vaccine at 12 to 18 months, some of those numbers 7 to 8 times more likely to develop autism than if they just waited till after 3 years old. So the question is, why didn't that data get published? Why wasn't that written in paper? And why didn't they at least just say, let's back this vaccine off until after 3 years old? I mean, I don't even have an answer to that. Is it diabolical? Is it just they thought it was such a small problem that we'll just accept the collateral damage of a few, autism children, acceptable losses? I don't know.
But, okay, so once this information was obtained, once Hooker got the information from William Thompson, the story is broken, it's out, it comes out on the internet.
Well, they gave it to Bill Posey.
So
Yes.
yeah, I mean, so
what's happened?
So the whole process is, I mean, they started recording the phone calls
Right.
because I mean, I think there's 30 or 40 phone calls
Right.
Brian Hooker had, but he was making those from his home. Andy was the one that said, "Look, what happens if this guy disappears? What happens if he stops talking?" And so Andy says, "We have to start recording those phone calls." So that was a choice because while this guy was bearing his soul, they wanted to be able to prove that it had happened. And so that's why the phone calls started being recorded. That's the heart of our movie, is these recorded phone calls and all the statements that William Thompson was making, along with the data he had provided to back up the statements he was making. So at a certain point, Brian Hooker started publishing this new data in a journal. He got a paper published. And Andy said, "Whoa, hold on a second, Brian. You just published a paper with data that only someone in the CDC could have provided you. You have just basically outed William Thompson. And he's a marked man. He's in trouble now. They're going to figure out it's Dr. William Thompson, and then what happens? I mean, who knows? They could disappear him. He could get thrown in jail. Who knows what's going to happen? And that was when they decided we have to publicly out him. And they contacted William Thompson at that moment and said, "Bill, look it. We've been recording your phone calls. You've laid out all of this information. You need to come forward now because Brian's just published this paper." And William Thompson was aware that paper had been published. And I don't think Thompson knew the danger he was in. Andy did. Andy had his life ruined. So heart to heart, Andy said to him, "Trust me, you've got to come forward. You've got to protect yourself. The world needs to know your name. Otherwise, you're in serious danger." And so that's how it went down. They gave him time to tell his family, get prepared, and then it came out online, and the whistleblower stepped forward and like you said, wrote and said, "I didn't know I was being recorded, but I stand by everything I said." And here's what's amazing. We have the top scientists saying we've committed fraud in the MMR study. It can be causally linked to autism, one of the worst epidemics in this country and in the world. And not one newspaper, not one news organization, not Fox, not MSNBC, not CNN, nobody thought that was a story worth telling. And then you're right, July, a year later, this guy's saying, "I need to be subpoenaed," because he's a government official. Then in July of last year, Bill Posey, a congressman out of Florida, stepped before the Congress of the United States and said, "I'm holding the data provided by the whistleblower at the CDC, Dr. William Thompson." He said, "I've extensively interviewed this man, and the statements he's making and the proof that he is providing is so alarming. We are talking about the health of our children, a crisis that now 1 million children, since this paper was published, are now on the autism spectrum." Okay, it's a horrific problem. And he said, "I beg, I implore the Congress of the United States, please subpoena William Thompson. We need to get to the bottom of what's happening at the Centers for Disease Control. 7 months later to right now, Congress has not done that job. And more alarming to me as a journalist and as a filmmaker, yet again, not one newspaper, not one news station thinks that it's a story that a congressman has stepped forward now saying that this whistleblower is very real and we need to do something about it. That's alarming. Why do we have free press in America? Are journalists allowed to do their job anymore? Because I'm telling you right now, Watergate wouldn't happen under these circumstances. The sponsors would say, no, don't go near it, we're not touching that story. We're in deep, deep trouble. This film was about an investigation of the health of our children. What it has unearthed is that we really have to start questioning the health of our democracy.
Two things I want to add into this, though, that one of the things that did get covered in the mainstream media in a very quiet way was the CDC did give a response. After William Thompson came forward and did his affidavit and said, I did in fact do these, the CDC came forward within days, gave a response, and in the response, they don't deny that there was, in fact, a way in which they had planned to do the study and that they disregarded a bunch of data. They don't deny that at all. They don't deny, and anybody can read what the CDC statement is, they further don't deny that when looking at both areas of looking at the children, their records from birth records and their records from school records, that there was a higher incidence of African American boys. They don't deny that at all, but they poo-poo it all away with a very simple explanation and say, well, we looked at it and said that the school records wouldn't be accurate because the children who were special needs would have gone to school, and so we slid all that to the side.
Doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make any sense, and yet that quieted everything down, which was fascinating to me. That a simple, we're not. I thought for sure they would either say nothing or deny, but they don't deny the very basic facts of it.
I don't think that statement had anything to do with it being quieted down. I think, no. I mean, I think that's what gets put out there. If anyone asks, that's what gets repeated. But what we just saw at Tribeca, when the film got kicked out of Tribeca, that's not, somebody doesn't just write a little paper or statement or, that is someone from the top coming down. We watch, people say, well, I mean, how would Andy really, you're seeing there's a conspiracy. We watched one of the greatest celebrities in this country in Robert De Niro. One of the most beloved, philanthropic, wonderful human beings in this country make a very powerful statement defending our film when, everything was descending upon it, lots of negative energy, lots of positive energy. He stepped forward and said, I have an autistic child. This is basically a story that's important to me, and it's a discussion that needs to be had.
Let's take a break, because we should
we'll
talk a little bit more about the De Niro moment.
Yeah.
And
the second
what's
De Niro
coming,
moment.
and the second De Niro moment, and what you all want to get out there for our viewers who are watching this interview about. You have something at the end of the film. You have a call to action, and we want to talk about that. So we'll take a break, and we'll be back.
I think also
Our twins, Justin and Jessica, were premature babies, so we always were very conscientious of their development. But I think it was probably 15 months, Justin started getting really obsessive compulsive with opening and closing doors. And Justin started tantruming a lot too. These would be major tantrums that were just completely debilitating to the family.
Having to take them out of the house, put them in the car, drive around, just to calm them down.
I remember a breaking point and just thinking, you know what, we got to do something, this is not right. Once we were on the track to getting a diagnosis for autism, we started sharing that with our close friends and family. It just so happens that somebody from our older daughter's private school called us out of the blue. She introduced herself and she says, "I know that recovery is possible." Those words so early in our journey were a guiding force for us. As we got more educated in knowing what is effective therapies for kids with autism, we realized quality ABA is vital to that progress. That's where we decided that CARD was the right provider for us and for our son. Justin responded very well to therapy. The behaviors were tracked, and we saw that what was being instituted was working.
Justin, what are you doing? You are coloring. Good for you.
There was real progress, and there was progress that was tangible.
I just remember when he made a sentence. He said a sentence. We were just happy about it, going, "No way, I can't believe you just did that."
What's the date?
The 18th.
18th of what month?
December.
Oh, what year is it?
2007.
Oh, okay. So how old are you today then?
5.
The therapies that CARD did for Justin didn't just impact his daily living skills, but it was a positive impact on our entire family.
I'm Justin. I am in 4th grade. I like playing video games sometimes. My dream to build a teleporter machine. Like sometimes if like we're on an airplane and it's like really long, you guys just say, "Oh, hurry up with that teleporter machine. We're waiting on you." And I just started Friday Night Lights. This is our 3rd game of the season, and it's pretty fun. You have to be fast.
We attribute so much of Justin's recovery to CARD. Their goal was the same as our goal. We wanted Justin recovered. June 12, 2008 is a day that I celebrate every year because that is the day that Justin was deemed recovered from autism. And Dr. Doreen Grandpichet met with us, looked at him and just said, "He's brilliant. You need to keep his mind stimulated because he's very smart and he has no residual traits of autism."
We are back with Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. I am Nancy Alspaugh-Jackson.
I'm Shannon Penrose.
With Shannon, and we are joined by Del Bigtree and Polly Tomey from the film Vaxxed, which if you haven't heard about, you must be living under a rock somewhere. I do encourage everyone, we're going to tell where the film is going to be playing, to go see this film, decide for yourselves. You owe it to yourself to do that. At least. So we were talking about De Niro and the De Niro moment. Polly, tell us a little bit what happened. It was accepted into Tribeca.
Yeah, that would have been a thrilling moment, right?
Of course, a thrilling moment. And let's not forget, Robert De Niro is a father of an autistic child.
Which most people did not know.
And now he said that his wife believes a vaccine-damaged child. So same story. So when he saw the film, or his wife saw the film, you can't but not need to do something about it. You know this is your child's story. So we were so grateful, so excited that at long last we're going to have a platform to be able to tell us epic story and the truth will come out and all those wonderful things. And then when the trolls came down on Tribeca, he put out another epic statement saying, you know, this is going to be shown. And so it's even more exciting because people are going to see this. Then wham, bam, slam, 24 hours later, we're out. Right. Shocked, stunned, not unbelieving it at all. For me, and I'm pretty sure we all had different thoughts, but for me, straight away, okay, I've been in this game a long time. Who got to you? What on earth, what level of threat did you have to do this? Because I know you wanted this film to be shown.
But there was another moment after that on the Today Show where he was questioned by Willie Geist and Savannah Guthrie. And he spoke his truth.
Yes.
Del, what did he say?
He said what we knew he'd been saying for several months. He was passionate about this film. It was an important film, and people needed to see it. He knew there was, that it was the discussion that he wanted to have, and he wanted the world to have, and we finally saw the Robert De Niro that we remembered just 2 weeks earlier, before all of this happened. I think what's scary is, I was going to say it before, is, you can't imagine the kind of pressure this is. We're talking about a very powerful man, Robert De Niro. We know that financially he's stable, his career is stable, he's recognized all over the world. I mean, and to watch that man when he made the statement, basically pulling the film, I felt like I was watching someone get dragged out into the middle of the square and tarred and feathered in front of, people said, "Are you angry?" I mean, my heart went out to him. My heart went out. I couldn't imagine what that night must have been like for he and his wife that have been supporting us all the way through this. They deal with this every day at home. To have to retract on a statement that came from his heart, an actor who bared his heart and soul before us, saying, "I have an autistic child that's important to me," to have to bring that back and turn on that yourself, that should scare everyone in this country. If whatever that pressure is that Polly's talking about, and I'm sure it's pharmaceutically based, the most powerful lobby in this country, whatever they said and whatever they did at that moment, if they can do that to a Robert De Niro, all of these parents, this is what you have been doing. This is why you're all quiet. This is why you can't tell your story. The threats and the fear of having your child taken away, having your life and your career destroyed publicly, that's what they do. It's an intimidation tactic, and it worked on one of the most powerful celebrities
But in fact,
in the
it didn't
country.
really work.
Not very long.
Because he...
Not very long.
He then came on the
Can I
Today
just say,
Show.
there's what makes me so angry is the media. I mean, the media has blood on its hands like I cannot tell you, because every single time they put out the whole vaccines do not cause autism, a young mother will go out and vaccinate her child. So they're not reporting the truth. And the same thing with De Niro and Andy. Both of them have repeatedly said, we are not anti-vaccine.
Right.
Yet still, the media today is saying anti-vaccine Wakefield, anti-vaccine De Niro. They have both said over and over again, they are not anti.
Just
Why
like
are they
Jenny
not
McCarthy never said,
hearing
"Don't
that?
vaccinate," and she was made, obviously. And then, of course, oh well, he's an actor. What does he know? He's not a scientist.
Yes, this is the thing that's overwhelming still today on the internet. People are saying, when did he get his medical license? Talking about De Niro, and would you rather listen to Robert De Niro, who's an actor, or listen to this doctor? And they picked a couple of doctors.
I would say this. Would you rather listen to Robert De Niro, or would you rather listen to the top scientist that did the study that said this vaccine is safe, saying we've committed fraud? That's the scientist they should be asking to hear from, not the doctors that have been lied to across this country. I'm not blaming doctors. Right. They've been lied to by the CDC lied to all of us. They've lied to all of medicine. They've lied to every civilian in the world. It's a very small group. It's not a giant conspiracy. 5 people under pressure from probably a small group of people inside the CDC all decided, let's just cover this thing up. So it's not a huge conspiracy among doctors. Doctors need to see this film. Every pediatrician in this country need to see this film. And they will realize. And last night we screened it to a VIP audience.
Standing ovation.
With several doctors, many celebrities, but several doctors that came up and said, wow, you are right. This is not an anti-vaccine movie. I need to get to the bottom. I am alarmed. I'm extremely alarmed. Pro-vaccine people, staunch people that have yelled at me, why would you get involved? I said, please, do me the favor. You can yell at me. I understand the passion. Please come see the film. And every one of them afterwards, and when we did it in New York, we have outtakes of people seas of people coming out and saying, this is not an anti-vaccine movie. This movie is giving real solutions to fixing a vaccine.
So let's talk about what some of those things are. You get to the end of the movie, as Nancy was saying before, and there are some calls to action. What are you asking the audience to do?
Number 1, we have a whistleblower inside the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. He still works there. He's protected under whistleblower status. He's been waiting for 1.5 years to have his day in court, which is the Congress of the United States. I mean, look at Flint, Michigan. You get lead in the water, as soon as that's discovered, it took 30 days to get that thing into the Congress and discuss that issue. And I think we're talking about, several hundred thousand, maybe 1,000 or so children that look like they're going to have problems. This issue is 1 million children. and increasing every day. This year alone, 100,000 children born will ultimately end up on the autism spectrum. We are building cities of autistic children that are going to be autistic adults. No matter where you sit on this issue, it's not only a horrific health situation, it's a society situation, but it's going to bankrupt this nation.
How are we going to care for them?
How are we going to care for them? How are we going to pay for this? And to think that it's a man-made problem, and one of the causes is being covered up by the most important health agency in the country. That's what this story is about. And so what are the calls to action? The calls to action are this. You need to call your congressperson immediately and say, I want Dr. William Thompson subpoenaed before Congress, and I want a hearing getting into the bottom of the fraud of the CDC revolving around the MMR autism study in 2000. Number one, we need to stand up as people, as citizens. This may be our last moment to have a voice. This lobby is buying politicians every day. They are writing laws to mandate their vaccines on your children. We just in California lost control of our own children. The government of the United States now has dominion over our children versus the parents. If I don't want to vaccinate today, I want to wait a week or 3 weeks, I no longer have that choice. The government will step in and either take my child away from me or say, you're going to have to submit to the vaccine schedule we see fit. And in the law, it also says any vaccine in the future that we see fit. And I will tell you this, people don't realize it. There are nearly 300 new vaccines in the pipeline as we speak. The new frontier and the future of the pharmaceutical industry is relying on vaccines. And they're relying on mandatory laws that you can't do anything about it. And it's not just going to stop at your children. They're already mandating adult laws for the VA. For VA benefits, they're going to have to be vaccinated in order to get their insurance. And guess who's next? You will not be able to get your Affordable Care Act insurance or your insurance policy until you as an adult are fully vaccinated.
Okay, so contact your
congressman,
okay, second.
demand C. Second, we want to repeal the Vaccine Injury Compensation Act. That's a whole other story that we could get deep into.
It's in
but
the film.
basically, it's in the film. You have to see it. But this is, we in 1986 took away liability from the pharmaceutical industry. We made it so that you cannot sue them when their vaccine injures your child. Instead, the taxpayers of the United States have to pay for it. And it's all done in this side court without a judge. And you basically just pay out these parents for these injured children. It's becoming increasingly difficult to get paid out. It used to be easy. You'd get $3 to $5 million to take care of your kid.
And millions have, in fact, been paid out for vaccine
Billions.
injuries.
$3 billion has been paid out by this Injury
And
Compensation
many people
Act.
don't know that.
No, they don't know that.
Because on the nightly news every night they say there are no injuries from vaccine, and yet there are billions of dollars that have been paid out for that in a court, but that's taxpayer money not coming from the companies that are making the vaccines.
Okay, so continue on the points you need people to do.
And then,
so you want that repealed?
We want that repealed.
Okay,
and
how do we get that done? Pressure on our congressmen.
Pressure on your Congress people. Look, we have to say to our elected officials, if you want to keep your job, then I need to see you taking action on this. I need to see you getting William Thompson in front of the Congress. That's not that hard a feat. That's
do we
why
know
I put
what
you
the
in office.
process is for that? Do they have to have a committee? Is there a committee that subpoenas? Do we know what the process is to subpoena him?
I don't know the exact process, and the truth is we were working on, the release of this film was supposed to be 2 months from now. We were going to be at Tribeca, and then a month later we were going to be having our first theaters in the beginning of June. We were building a website, that could show all of the data so people could access it and really study it themselves, and we were talking to lobbyists and congressional officials on how to work on politically activating this entire situation. But given what happened at Tribeca and this onslaught of negative statements about a film no one had ever seen, we literally watched almost every newspaper in the country bash a film they hadn't seen and say, don't go see it. And we said, well, we better at least put it out there so people can make up their own mind. So we're in a catch-up place. There's a lot of studying I had planned on doing, and we were doing think tanks to figure out how do we make this a congressional issue. And we're working on that right now as we speak. But right now, you just have to simply let your congressman know you're aware of this issue and that you want these demands.
Okay. So those two things.
So those two things. Next, we want the MMR vaccine broken up. We want, look, if you want to use the MMR, go right ahead. But we want parents to have another option. The one option that was basically has never, the measles vaccine by itself, the single measles vaccine, there's never been a parent accusing that of autism. Instead of
possibly triggering
being one of the issues. So we believe that Andy Wakefield's statement, over 10 years ago, that the single measles, single mumps, single rubella is the safer way to protect yourself from those diseases. And all we want is those single vaccines made
And the reason for not doing that would be what?
I can't imagine why any scientist or doctor would say we should never allow you single vaccines. It doesn't make sense. Someone explained to me why we shouldn't in the United States of America have that option. So we say demand that option from your pediatrician, make your pediatrician contact his congresspeople, make our doctors accountable on that.
It
say,
is currently not
you
available in the United States.
It.
You cannot get it. There was a time when you could. Certain doctors would do it, but you cannot do that anymore.
And there are factories right now making a single measles, making a single mumps, and making a single rubella vaccine that then has to be mixed together. So it already exists. There's not some giant cost to it, but yes, Merck will lose the patent, they'll lose the monopoly, and we've got to stop protecting Merck's financial bottom dollar over the health of our children. And lastly, our fourth call to action is we want every vaccine categorized exactly like every pharmaceutical drug is, so that it has to be tested.
They're not tested. I was shocked, actually, in the film. This was a big light bulb. Tell us how they test it.
This shocks me. This shocked me. I mean, I think we all, I'm a medical journalist. I'd never realized this. But we are not going through long-term safety studies. When we think about anything we're giving our children, any drug, we assume that there's a placebo group. We all sort of have some basic understanding of this, that there's one group that takes the drug or the vaccine and a group that doesn't. And we monitor them over a long course of time to say, does the group that took the vaccine have more side effects? Do they have more incidence of ADD, ADHD? Do they have more incidence of asthma, psoriasis, autism, leukemia? I mean, these are things we should be looking at.
It's called a double-blind study.
It's called a double-blind study. Not being done on vaccines, done on Viagra, done on a pill we give grandpa, but not done on an injection we're putting in the bloodstream of a 1-day-old child.
I think we all assume that the double-blind studies on vaccines were done a long time ago. But the vaccines that we have today, they aren't being done. I do know, having asked somebody about this, the argument for it is that it's unsafe for a child to be unvaccinated in the world. And so to ask a group to be a part of a study and not know whether they got it is putting a child at risk.
They say it's a great line, and it's brilliantly marketed, and these guys are really smart in how they get everybody tied up. They say it's unethical.
Right.
So then do this. It's very simple. Just like the study that this whole thing is about, it's a demographic study, it's an epidemiology study. I mean, these kids already exist, we already have their records. There are unvaccinated children all over this country. 3 to 5% based on wherever you're living. They're registered, they have to go to school. What we're asking for is the vaxxed versus unvaxxed study.
Has there been a study done on unvaccinated children versus vaccinated children?
Not that's been recognized by a major medical paper or institution. They're done by institutions, they're done by scientists, and the results are extremely alarming. But if you can't get that published in one of the medical journals, then it's not considered, the real deal. And so, fine, we want it, and it can't be the CDC at this point. I mean, based on this movie, you realize the CDC is incapable of handling a real study. They are a mess. They've created a mess. They are clearly manipulating data. So what we want immediately is an independent body that is firewalled against control from pharmaceutical interests. We want every vaccine tested immediately, and we want the vax versus unvaxxed study. Anyone that says vaccines have been proven safe, I will say you cannot say that until we line up. Here's the unvaccinated population, and here's the vaccinated population. Is the vaccinated population, do they have the same rates of autism? Do they have the same rates of leukemia? Do they have the same rates of ADD, ADHD? You look at the Amish. They do not vaccinate, or very lightly.
And the scientists say, well, that's a pure genetic line.
Right, it's genetic, right? Oh, so
there's always a reason.
There's always a reason.
All right. You know what? Let's take a quick break.
Yes.
Let's come back with some final words, where people can see the film, and final words from both of you that you'd like to say to our viewers.
Great.
So let's take a quick break.
So we're going to do down dog next. So with down dog, there are several different ways that you can do it, and I want to show you first and then help you with yours so that we can work on what feels good for you, okay? All right, because there's no right way to do it. It's more about what your body likes, right? So for me, what I'm going to do is start off with my hands at the top of my mat, my headlights. My fingers are aiming towards the top of my mat, and then I'm going to tuck my toes, and then my head is also going to drop, and I'm going to look between my toes. Okay? And my body should be, or hopefully, like an A shape. Or V, yes.
Upside down V.
Yep. And so if your quads are tight or your hamstrings are tight, you might need to bend your knees a little bit.
Then it's you.
Or if your shoulders are a little strained or a little tight, remember to push in through your feet, but also sometimes what feels really good is going down on your forearms, like this. You can actually start out this way instead, it's a little easier. So your forearms rest on the floor, you still tuck your toes, and then you're still looking between your toes, but rather than being on your hands then, your weight's along your hands and your forearms. Okay? All right. So, now it's your turn. Okay? So, yep. You're going to do on your hands? Okay, yep. So your fingers are facing the front of the mat. Or are you doing forearms? Forearms? Okay, there we go. Wow, you're very bendy. Very nice. And your gaze is right here between your toes. Excellent. Very nice, Jem. Wow. Awesome. Feet are a nice distance apart. How does that feel?
Okay.
Awesome. You want to come down? Excellent. Good. Good.
This is your
Welcome back
Okay.
to a special edition of Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. Nancy and I are here with some of the filmmakers from the film Vax.
What a provocative conversation this has
Yes,
been.
we
Your
certainly-
passion, first of all, has to be lauded, regardless of where people come down on this issue. The passion of you, Polly, as a mom, and Del, as a filmmaker, is unbelievable. I mean, truly. Tell us where people can see the film, where it's playing now, so they can decide for themselves whether Vaxxed has validity or not. Where?
Okay, so right now, we are in New York. So we're going to be at the Manhattan Film Festival at 2 p.m. with a question and answer panel with a lot of good people are going to be there. Brian Hooker, Cheryl Atkinson's going to be there.
Andy, Polly,
Andy
me,
Aslot,
you know.
and other brilliant people.
Oh,
Sheila
yeah.
Ely, the
Okay.
wonderful mother-in-law, she's going to be there. That's a
Stephanie
really,
Seneff.
Yeah, that's the one to go to if you really want to talk to
But
her.
also in New York is Angelica Theater. Get right out to the Angelica. They've been amazing in allowing free speech and keeping that theater open. So get out.
But, okay, so the other places, so this is exciting because people are asking us where else it's going to be around the country. Tempe, Arizona.
Tempe, Arizona.
Yeah.
Okay. Harkins Valley Art.
Yeah.
Okay. But if you go
Harkins Valley
Art.
Okay.
But if parents go to vaxthemovie.com, all of this will be on there.
Okay, vaxthemovie.com to find out where you can go
Yeah,
to
but
screen the film.
San Diego as well, going to be there on the 24th. So we're getting around the country now. So get on Vax the Movie, sign up, it's free, and we will send you exactly as we are going out where we're going out.
We're spreading every week. We're in San Diego at the Angelica, Carmel Mountain. We're at Peoria, Arizona, Harkins Arrowhead Mountain. We're also going to be moving into Plano, Texas, Dallas, Texas. It's coming to a theater near you.
Other film festivals that you will be at?
Well,
Or-
right now we're not. We may be, we may not. All we know is the Manhattan Film Festival right now. We are really trying to get in those theaters. And people say, why aren't you just putting it online so I can get to it online? And my answer to that is there have been great movies that have used that approach. The grassroots around this is wonderful. This film was not made for the grassroots. This film was not made for the people that already understand this issue. This film is for the citizens of the United States, every single one of them, including the 90% of Americans that are just walking their kids right into this vaccine decision without doing any research and not realizing that there's issues here. So this film is for everybody. And so that's why we want it in theaters. We want the visibility there so that we can affect change.
Okay, and what they're saying as well is if you want it in your local theatre, then you write to that theatre, call the owner, say, we really, really want to get vaccinated. Get together with loads of other people and really go for it that way, because that's going to help enormously.
Okay. Any final words from a passionate mother of a son?
So I've got a message to parents out there with vaccine-damaged children. Continually, even now, Paul Offit, others saying, vaccines do not cause autism. Okay, now it's our turn to step up. We have to show them our children. We have to show them we're real and we're there. They cannot keep putting that statement out. Every time they do that, another baby is damaged. So time for parents, be brave, be unafraid, get out there and tell your child's story. And if you can't get onto local media, film it yourself, be the media. So that's very important. And all new mothers who were the polytommies before that didn't do their homework, see vaxxed. Please see vax. Do not make the same mistakes that I did. It's critical.
Del?
Don't allow the media to tell you what to say, what to do, what to see, what to think. Do not. We are the United States of America. We have free thought. We have free expression. I'm not telling you that my film has all the answers. It's not a court of law. As a filmmaker, our job is to ask the appropriate questions. These are very reasonable, appropriate questions based on a very real scientist that's giving us disturbing information. See it for yourself. Make up your own mind. Don't let your mind be made up for you because you're listening to bumper sticker slogans. Democracy is hanging in the balance right now. We see it in our political officials. We know that they're being manipulated by the banks. We know they're being manipulated by Monsanto. We know they're being manipulated by Exxon. You also have to realize they're being manipulated by Merck and pharmaceutical industries that are buying our politicians as we speak. If we cannot ask questions like this, if you do not pursue films and people that are trying to bring you the truth in a sponsor-driven world, if you don't get out and support this, at least for the support of free thought against censorship, then don't complain when the United States of America is no longer the free country you thought you were living in.
Can we just talk about one last thing? Because you used a word, and here in the United States, it gets used a lot, and in the other way, the word cause. Causation in terms of vaccine causing autism. There's a big movement here that says plays a role in, because they believe that there is a genetic component and an environmental.
Fine.
I just want to know from you.
Okay, here's the thing. I'm just a mum. And I just saw what happened to my child.
Yes.
My child was 100% healthy, little sniffly cold maybe, but he had passed all his milestones. He had a future. He had a vaccine, he had a seizure, it caused him to have autism. So really not
Whether there
particularly
might have been
worried
other factors or not, you feel that's the main issue.
As his mother, I
just
know
wanted to clarify
that's what done my
And I think it's important to say that the MMR is what's blamed by the majority of parents, but other parents say it was the DTaP, or a fluorescent light bulb broke on the ground, and my son that night started having seizures. So I think in our film, Doreen Grandpichet, I think puts it best, and she was so fantastic. But what she said is, what she believes autism is children that cannot detoxify quick enough. They can't get these toxins out of their body. They can't clear the way other children are. So that's the answer to the question. Why some kids and not others? We have children that are having trouble getting rid of the toxin in their body, and that toxin could be coming from their food. It's probably it's an accumulation issue.
But also little things like how strange that all our children seem to be on antibiotics a little bit before, a little bit after, had the same old little ear thing. Could it be the antibiotics? Could it be the Tylenol that we religiously gave before and after, as our doctors told us to? Do not know. All I know, eldest daughter, had it fine, all wonderful, bright, clever, UT student. Billy, not fine. So excuse me if my other son, I'm not going to risk it. It's not safe.
And I think, and one of the things that you say in the film that's so important is that we stop this denying parents who have this story. And I think it's so important that we not deny that. I just wanted to give it an opportunity to clarify the words that we were using. But I would be the last person who would want to deny that that happened to
That's
you.
your truth. And
Right.
we encourage
And
all parents to speak their truth.
Just one quick thing I just really
Yes,
want to
yeah.
say. I am so tired of seeing Andrew Wakefield blamed for people not vaccinating their children.
Oh.
Shall I tell you why people are not vaccinating their children? Because they are watching. My family and friends saw what happened to Billy. So they said, you know what, I'm not going to do that because Billy, I know Billy was fine and I know he's not fine now. So I'm going to give my kid a miss. They don't even know who Andrew Wakefield is half the time.
Exactly.
So stop, media, stop. It's pathetic.
Well,
I'm bored of it,
I
actually.
believe
Boring.
as an autism mom too, I'm offended that anybody can say to me, oh, well, an actress or an actor or one doctor or one person can tell me what I'm going to do with my child. That
I
seems
agree.
ridiculous.
I'm offended. I know my truth, and I encourage all parents to speak their truth.
And seize this moment. We made a movie, but right now we have a movement. Don't leave Robert De Niro hanging out there by himself. He's brave now. He's stepped forward. Join him. All the parents have to step up and say, this happened to me too. And all of the people that know people have to stand by your friends and say, this happened. Go see Vax. Don't be afraid to talk about it. This is a discussion we need to have. But we have a momentum now. We have the movement. If we let this go away and we all sit on our hands and sit back and say, I wonder what's going to happen with that, then all is lost.
There you go. There you have it.
so much
So
for being here, you guys.
we're going to wrap it up, and very interesting discussion. We encourage all of our viewers to write in, tell us what you think about this hour.
Ask
And
questions.
Yeah.
That's what it's
ask
all
questions
about. Ask
and
questions.
speak your truth. So
Thank you so much for being with us. We want to say goodbye to everybody. Give your kiddos a hug from me.
and give yourselves a hug from me.
Bye-bye
Thanks for
for
joining
now.
us. Bye-bye.
Welcome back. So that was our interview end to end. That is with absolutely no edits. We want to thank both Del Bigtree and Polly Tomey for sitting down with Nancy and I and taking the time to answer our questions. We are encouraging people to see the film for yourselves. You know, I believe that if you see it, you'll have more questions. And you can go to their website, find out more about where it's playing. They're doing showings all around the country. But again, we want to thank them. They're on a very busy schedule. You may have seen them on Fox and Friends this morning. So I also want to take a second here at the end of the show to say we want a special thank you to Emily Goodwin for coming and being with us on very short notice to do that recording because our fabulous Kelby Wood, I don't want to cry, but Kelby is in the process of leaving us. Kelby is going on to greener pastures to work on a passion project. We have a tradition here. I don't know if Kelby knows about, but when it's time for Kelby to leave, we're in the process of hiring somebody to take Kelby's place, and he'll train them. And when it's time for him to leave, we always have them on the last day be on the show. So we're going to make Kelby, he said he would do it. So we'll have him sit, and then we'll let him tell you about what it is that he's going to work on. But we have thoroughly loved having Kelby to be here with us. It was like old home because Kelby couldn't be with us on Friday. We had Emily come in. I'd like to think that somewhere down the line we could pull Kelby back in to work on something with us. We're amassing a team of people that know what Autism-Live is about. So Emily came back to do that, and we really want to thank. We could not have done that without her. So thank you to Miss Emily. And we'll keep you posted on when Kelby will actually be leaving us, and you can send your notes and thoughts. I know that for a lot of you, that's a sniff, but he'll still be around, and hopefully we'll bring you news of the Kelbster. All right, we are out of time, but we'll be back next Wednesday. We're on this shortened schedule, just Wednesdays and Thursdays for April. We want to hear from you guys. If you're missing the Tuesday situation, make sure that you write to us soon, because we're starting to make the schedule for the rest of the year. But we're going to be back on Wednesday with Dr. Doreen Grampachet for Ask Dr. Doreen, and we've got a great Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. And on Thursday, we've got the Miracle Project and the Miracle Project performers that are going to be with us. They're getting ready for Autism Rocks LA, a great concert that's happening a week from tomorrow, starring James Durbin, but also having a bunch of individuals who have been on this show, including our fabulous Logan Shepard, the drummer. You've seen our drumming video recently, and Spencer Hart, and many others. So we're going to have Coach E and some folks from the Miracle Project with us next Thursday. It's going to be a very uplifting week. You don't want to miss it. It's the end of April. Big stuff in store. All right. That's it for me. Thank you for being with us. And until next week, give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too. Bye-bye for now.